Well, welcome to another Peak Careers interview. Today we're going to look at and talk to a couple folks about what's happening at college career centers in 2020, the year that we'll all remember forever. I've got Kate Brooks, who is the Executive Director of the Career Center at Vanderbilt University, and Paul Timmins, Executive Director of the University of Oregon Career Center. So we're going to look at some of the changes that happened with during this pandemic time for college career centers specifically, but I think some of it will play over into actual career work everywhere. Briefly, Kate Brooks is the executive director at Vanderbilt, and she is the author of several career books, including You Majored in What, which I love that book. Still have it on my shelf. I've read it. I'm anxious now to take a peek at her Picture Your Career, which is actually free on the Vanderbilt career website. Is that right? Vanderbilt
That's
career
correct.
website. So you can grab that book. And she's also coming out with What Color Is Your Parachute? You may have heard about that book from Dick Bowles. And she, now that he's passed, she is actually going to be keeping these going, and also What Color Is Your Parachute for college students. So anxious to see that. Paul, I met Paul in Minnesota. He has quite a long career in Minnesota. I'm wondering how his Minnesotan accent's playing out in Oregon, but he collaborates with staff and faculty across campus to ensure that all Oregon graduates are prepared to succeed in their chosen career. 25 years in the higher education and is a past president of National Career Development. Welcome, both of you today. Very much good to see you. So, we're going to start today. I want to start off, we'll start with Kate and see what happens here. But the first question I want to talk about is, obviously 2020, we're dealing with this pandemic. So what are the changes that your college career center is doing these days? And can you just sort of, both of you kind of say, how big is Vanderbilt? I mean, I know kind of University of Oregon, but like what kind of career center are you dealing with? Just give a little snapshot of that. And then what are some of the changes?
Okay. Well, the Vanderbilt Career Center originally served undergraduate students, which is about 6,800 students, but now we've added on the graduate students as well. So we're serving closer to about 9,000 students, a little over that. All told, there's about 12,000 students at Vanderbilt if you add in the medical school and the law school and all of that. And in terms of the changes that we've made, like everyone else, I think we went virtual. And I have to say, there's a lot of just parallels. We were doing one-on-one coaching in person. Now we do one-on-one coaching via Zoom. We were running workshops in person. Now we're doing them on Zoom. We had employer information sessions. Now they're on Zoom. Same thing with our career fair coming up. That's going to be virtual as well, because at this point, there's no way you can gather 2,000 students and 125 employers in a large arena. That will not work. So everything at this point is online and virtual. And I have to say that it's been a great learning experience, because we actually increased the number of students that we're serving. We've had more students do the online work than would come into our office. And I think they view it as kind of convenient, and they don't have to go over to an office right now. So those would be the big changes. It's like the services are more or less the same. It's just the platform and the way we run them.
Wow. Interesting. Paul?
Yeah, so for us at the University of Oregon, so in our Career Center, so the University of Oregon has around 23,000 students, somewhere in that neighborhood. We have kind of a network of career offices across campus. So my office is open to all students at the University of Oregon, both undergraduate and graduate, but many of our professional schools, business, journalism, music, there are other schools that also have career center operations. And so we kind of have a network across campus. Similar to what Kate described, I think in the spring, March 16th was the day where we sent everyone home, and kind of all of a sudden had to relearn what we were doing. And I think it was a pretty steep learning curve for us as an office. We had not done a lot of remote appointments, virtual appointments, and so had to kind of invent systems and get better at that all at once. going into the fall term, it feels like we are at least able to be a little bit more intentional. And, we're anticipating, even though our campus is currently anticipating being open for at least some classes, we are still operating under the assumption that all of our career support will remain virtual, definitely for the fall term and quite possibly beyond that. And yeah, it is, I appreciate what Kate's saying, that I think there are so many things that we have always done face-to-face in the past, and they do translate pretty well over to the virtual space. And so we're able to continue, trying to serve students and, having appointments available and making plans for our virtual fairs and doing online workshops for students. I think we're still working to, kind of learn what that means for how to engage with students across campus. And it's been a pretty steep learning curve, but we can do it, and we'll be needing to do it.
I think so many people are more comfortable in this format now than ever. And even people had FaceTime on their phones, and so they were FaceTime and they were Skyping, and so and so there was sort of a mini learning curve that was already going on to some degree, but it was. Of course, on mid-March, it was a much bigger. I've been using Zoom for a while, and I used to always have to explain to people. I don't have to explain to anybody anymore about what Zoom is and how it works. And sometimes they're going, "Hey, you could do this with Zoom," and I'm like, "Oh, geez, I didn't even know that." But I'm curious, though, as you have moved to this online delivery of career services. How are you marketing this to these students? I mean, what's working? I mean, is it only just an email that gets sent? I mean, because we used to always, when I worked at college career centers, we'd send out an email, but it didn't mean they'd come, right? So, I mean, is there a difference with your marketing, or how's that going?
We do the usual newsletters and emails and everything, and it's on our website, that we're now 100% virtual. So, some of the marketing wasn't necessary in the sense that everything was virtual starting in March. So, and our office had already done virtual a fair amount because we worked with students who were studying abroad. So what I like about Zoom is that it brings it all onto one platform. Like you said, we were doing, different Google Hangout. We were doing, all these different formats depending on what students wanted to do. And now everybody does Zoom. So that makes it much more consistent. But as far as the marketing goes, we do our usual marketing for programs that we would do anyway, targeted emails and newsletters and things. But the students, again, they just sort of take it for granted that, I guess the Career Center must be on Zoom. And so they check it out, and there we are.
I think with the whole campus having gone remote, I mean, every office is doing the same thing, right? Advising, or every office has had to go online. So I think students expect that. I think one difference that did come up for us is we've always, in our office, we serve all of our undergraduate students, or all of our students. We also serve alumni in our case, we serve them for 1 year after graduation, which has always been kind of one of those things that in my previous employer, we would tell students that, but because so few of them were physically close by and able to come in, we didn't see that many of our young alumni who came in. So now, first of all, the job market is horrible. So, people need support, but also just the convenience factor that Kate already mentioned, that it's easy for people to access the virtual appointments. So I think we've seen a few more of our alumni who've interacted with us. And it was nice, at least, during graduation time, I worked with one of our deans to insert some language into, some of his remarks for students, just to remind them of that they can come in and continue accessing our services. So I think the convenience factor for students and for young alumni has been nice. And that's something I know that's one of the things we'll continue talking about here in our conversation, but I don't think that will go away. We'll want to continue finding ways of being as accessible to all of our population, all of our students. And so this online format is inherently more accessible.
I think, again, when I think back to the colleges that I worked at and some of the workshops that we did, I mean, some of them are actually fairly easy to just move, you know, to a Zoom because you're presenting information. Sometimes at Colby College, we would bring alumni. We'd bring alumni in, you know, via Skype and bring them in and have them talk to the students, the international students or whatever the topic was. But it seems to me that there's some things that are much harder. I mean, how do you, well, I'll ask, you know, what do you think is the hardest part of the services that you provide? I'm going to guess. I mean, I would think that resume stuff, like, I mean, I feel like there's such a huge dialogue when I'm meeting with students. Do you have a perception of what's the most difficult thing to sort of transport over to this?
I think for us, resume is not a problem because we either do just a one-on-one and you share your screen and we share the resumes ahead of time. So the coach has already taken a look at it and you know, can walk through it with the student. That hasn't been a problem. I think the networking workshops are harder to do because we kept ours pretty active and we would have them practice it and go around the room and, you know, meet up with people. We'd have an exercise where they had, you know, 5 minutes to find out as much what they had in common with this stranger they had just met, you know, those kinds of games. And that's, I don't know how, so that we've really tried yet to creatively take a networking workshop online that way. So that's to be explored.
That's interesting. I mean, I teach the facilitating career development course and I do a lot of dyads and triads, but with the breakout rooms, it actually is pretty effective. You know, I'm wondering if there's a way to assign a coach, you know, maybe to different breakout rooms and then be an observer and have them practice it. But I mean, that's a good point. Paul, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, well, it's just to keep going on that point. Yeah, we've done some of that, you know, some virtual coffee chats or kind of some connect events where that's what we've tried to do is use Zoom and use breakout rooms, and that's gone pretty well. So I think the format for that worked for us. Although, you know, I think my answer to the question is going to be, I'm sorry, it's going to end because it's going to connect with that. We're gearing up for our fall career fair and part-time job fair that we have coming up. That's the part that I'm nervous about. We have not done virtual. I mean, we've not done our own virtual fairs in the past, and that's a piece that feels pretty different to me, right? I mean, the in-person fair where you can walk around and interact with employers and kind of bounce from person to person and do the networking in that format. That's pretty different in the virtual fairs. Now, I think there are ways in which it can work and we can have students interacting with employers, but that feels pretty different. So I'm nervous about, you know, getting students prepped up with skills that I mean, first of all, we've got to get them to sign up in advance, which you know, they could just walk in the door of our career fair. Now I need them to sign up in advance. I need them to think about how to show up in the virtual space. I need to have them think about, you know, making sure their resume is posted to to our site in advance. So there are extra steps that they have to take. So that's a piece that I'm a little bit nervous about. And then just the mechanics of the networking that happen at a fair or in a networking event, it's different. And so that I think is the part that's challenging.
I mean, there's different skill sets, right? I mean, when we did the live job fairs, you knew what skills needed to be taught, right? You know, we dress this way, be this way, present yourself, and now we have to go. We got to really think about how is this going to play out? How are they going to enter? Like you said, how are they going to enter, and what's going on behind them? And yeah, I mean, it's just a whole ton of other things that has to happen. What, you know, when you're one-on-one, 10 people, it's all manageable. 50 and more on Zoom, you gotta have your act together.
Well, and I think it's worth pointing out, and I remind students of this, that, I mean, Zoom, you know, this is what they're going to be doing in their real world career too, right? I mean, this is not just something that you're doing temporarily while we can't all be in person. I mean, the jobs of the future are going to require you to work with people around the world. You know, my wife works from home also. I can hear her upstairs right now on a call that she's on where she's, you know, the only one in this area who works for her company. I mean, we've got to get used to this and used to the interaction and become skilled at it. And so it's a skill that our students are building that will serve them well in the future. And I think that's important to remind them of that.
Right. And their interviews now are going to be this way. And so learning how to handle this kind of a platform is very important.
So that's kind of a nice segue to my second and last question, and that is just what do you folks see as not trends ending when the pandemic ends, but what do you see changing with career services yeah, as we move forward? And now we can start with Paul, but you've kind of alluded to some of the stuff. But I mean, what do you see changing? I mean, we've made some changes from the pandemic, but I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that continues.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, just everyone being better at using Zoom and, kind of the online access, it's going to, I think, give all of our students access to more employers and more alumni, right? My students at the University of Oregon aren't going to only be interacting with the employers who travel to Eugene, Oregon, right? Now, this has gotten us, we're all now used to networking and doing Zoom calls with people regardless of where they are. So I think it really does open up some opportunities for students in which, when employers start hiring again, I think they will probably be more comfortable with doing virtual interviews, and they might not travel to campuses as much as they used to in the past. They might do fewer on-campus interviews or career fairs in person in favor of doing online interaction. So I think that's something that won't change. So I think career centers are going to have to get used to helping students in some different ways, both in person and also virtually, and encouraging the students to interact with employers virtually as well. So I'm excited for that, frankly. I think the barrier of forcing an employer to travel to Eugene, many of them do, but if I can get students to interact with them quickly online and do alumni panels quickly online, it gives us access to a whole bunch of alumni and employers that we wouldn't have been able to get to come to in-person things. So I think that's one big area that will be different for us.
Interesting. Kate?
Yeah, and I would agree, just the ease of getting alumni panels together. Normally you have to think about, gee, do we have to pay for their transportation? And it gets into cost and all of that. And with this technology, we're not going to have to do that. And I think students will be very accepting of watching people on virtual platform. I think another area we're going to be looking at for us is just, do we need to have all of our staff in our office? And if not in our office, do they need to be in Nashville, which is where my school is located? Would there be an advantage to hiring an employer relations person who actually lives in Washington, D.C. all the time, so that person, presumably when we have a vaccine and people can go back out again, that person could network and could meet with employers right there in the city, set up city-based events, maybe work with our alumni office or our development office a little bit. Could a position like that be created where they would never actually come to the Career Center except maybe once a year for a meeting or something? And then you could have those folks all over the country and wherever your key employer spots are, whether that's Silicon Valley or Chicago or New York. And then even so with coaches, do we have to hire coaches here in Nashville, or could a coach be located in a random location, because it doesn't really matter where they're coming from at that point. So I think these are some of the things that I think we'll be exploring, is how much of your office actually needs to be staffed with all your people and how many can be remote. I believe Johns Hopkins made the decision that they are staying remote forever. I think, who knows how long forever lasts in higher ed. But I think for right now, their plan is to not return and have an office on campus. I think they are going to stay remote with all of their Career Center employees. So, I think these are some things we'll be looking at in the future.
Well, and I think companies are looking at the same thing, right? They're companies and managers and supervisors who were reluctant to let someone work from home suddenly are going, yeah, you know what? They're still producing. I mean, I'm much more productive here than I was when I was at the community college. At the community college, you got to be nice to people, right? You got to say hi. You got to go, you go get a cup of coffee and you chit chat. Here, there ain't nobody here, So like I found I was much more productive working from home. I can get done, a lot more. And so I think a lot of companies, just as you've said, a lot of companies are starting to realize, wait a minute here, maybe we don't need as much office space. Maybe we need to look at how we do things in a little different way. And,
Mhm.
what are the advantages here? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, I know, we're looking at it in terms of things like tax, there are tax implications. If you are a permanent resident in another state and you're working in another state, now you've got tax things to deal with. So there are issues to be worked through, but I think they can be. I'm sorry, Paul, I think I might have cut you off.
Well, yeah, no, that's a great point. And I think we already touched on, but just to reiterate, from the student standpoint, for them to very easily, have an appointment when they want, where they don't have to travel across campus or across town or across the state if they're a remote student, for them to be able to very quickly interact with a career coach online. I just think that's another thing that's not going to go away. Is it'd be great to have in-person appointments or in-person drop-in hours, and we'll get back to that, but the online appointments aren't going away.
And I wonder are there some students who weren't being served that are being served now, right? I mean, this whole social justice issue of this student can't afford to go make a big trip into Portland, Oregon, right? Because my dad can pay for me to go, but nobody's here to pay for me to go to Portland to do this sort of outreach, or if they, whatever. Now, as long as they have access to broadband internet and they have technology, it actually in some ways opens up a lot more to services to some people that maybe didn't really have access, that we assumed had access but didn't.
Yeah, that's correct. Some of our treks, for instance, we take treks to various cities, and we always had funding to help students who couldn't afford, but we never had full funding. We never had that ability to just fully fund all the treks. And so I'm sure there were students who made a decision not to go for financial reasons. And now we're looking at how we're going to make our treks online and bring them the city to the Zoom conference. And so again, the treks are going to be much less expensive.
Creativity and career centers. That's what we're talking about here, is how do you sort of still deliver the services in a quality way, but it's going to be done differently. It's going to look different. And what other thoughts? Any other thoughts about trends that you think are going to continue, or other thoughts about this sort of college career centers and how we're dealing with this pandemic?
I think it's hard to predict because what can happen, of course, is everybody sort of forgets and you just kind of go back to the way you did things. But I don't know that that's going to happen here, because I do think employers are going to see a cost savings, not what Paul was saying, not having to come to campus, not having to fly to all these different locations. They're going to, I suspect, become much more careful about which locations they do come to, and then they'll have a lot of virtual opportunities for the schools that are let's just call it less geographically desirable. The schools that maybe took a plane ride and a long car ride to get to because of where they were located. I think we're going to see employers consistently choosing this virtual format to avoid the costs of on-campus recruiting.
Interesting.
And I think too that the question of how much easier it is to do alumni panels, or to encourage students to do informational interviews with alumni via Zoom. Something else I've been thinking about is how do we empower our faculty to bring career readiness stuff into their classrooms? And we've been thinking about that for a long time. Well, now that it's easier to do that virtually, how do I encourage faculty to, kind of make it easier for them to bring an alumni panel into their class of young grads to talk about, how they've transitioned into life after graduation. So that's something else that's sort of been on my mind, is that I think even as our offices our career services offices are transforming, the way in which we interact with our faculty and other partners across campus and the way that we support them, I think that will continue evolving too. So there should be some opportunities there to also help them look into bringing career into what they do in some ways that have been hard in the past when they couldn't bring a panel into their classes. Well, now they can do it online.
Right.
And things like services to identity-based groups. You know, we used to have office hours in the Black Cultural Center or in our LGBTQ center. And, you know, now we're looking at, so how do we do that now? You know, how are those organizations or those student groups meeting, and can we join those meetings? And are there ways for the Career Center to integrate again into those different offices as needed? So it's just sort of it's always about being nimble and looking for, okay, the goal is to do this. So how do we make that happen?
I love it. I mean, for me, it's all that creativity and like you say, being nimble, saying, all right, this is what we got. How are we going to make this work? But not only that is how can we make it work better, right? I mean, in some ways, it's actually working better, you know, as crazy as it feels like at times, where it's like, oh my gosh, how are we doing this? You know, I really feel like you both have raised a bunch of great issues, and there's going to be a lot of good that comes out of this, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you both very much. I'm going to want to just chat a little bit about who I am and what I do. So I'm Jim Peacock with Peak Careers Consulting. I've been teaching the Facilitating Career Development class since 2001. And I also offer online discussion-based seminars for career practitioners. And so these are different online seminars than, they're not independent studies. I don't run them until I have 5 to 10 people, and career service providers or career practitioners, career counselors, on a wide variety of different career topics. And then they're discussion-based. Each week, there's new readings or videos to watch, and then discussions that happen out of that. And then the next week, for 5 weeks, new discussions come up and new interactions. I also I used to do face-to-face workshops. I still do them, but I'm moving some of them online, and I have a handful of individual career coaching clients. I'm an author of Field Guide for Career Practitioners, and I also send out weekly career emails on Tuesday mornings. And if you'd like to sign up for that, I'll get you the top 10 tips of working with an undecided person. You can just go to my website and you can sign up there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, and Instagram. But if you really want me to connect with me, it's going to be LinkedIn mostly. That's where I hang out and spend most of my time. But I am on all those. So listen, thank you both very much for joining me today. I appreciate your insights and your expertise. So thank you both.
Thank you.
You're
It's a
welcome.
pleasure.
Pleasure. Yeah.